Hey, Nathan here. Welcome back to another tutorial from the XNA Tower Defense Engine series. Last tutorial we discussed the Wave Information class and started part 1 of that process. In this tutorial we're going to do the Map Region class and do part 1 of that process as well. So just like any class we will ever make, go to the very top and add those two using statements that you've been adding in the past few videos. And using Microsoft.xnative Framework and using Microsoft.xnative Framework.graphics. And then public class map region. Okay, now let's go to the properties and get those set up. So just like the Wave Information class, we obviously have a set area that the map region covers. And in that case, we need to have a public rectangle. And you can call it whatever you want. I call it rectangle. Get and private set. And again, we need access. Of course, it's a map region, so we do need access to the map, the active map. And in order to get that, we have a session object. The session object contains the current active map. Okay, so now when you click buy a tower, you will notice that the user interface changes from the map region. User interface changes from what you normally see, and it gives it that overlay, that little red and green overlay with blue as the enemy spawner. Alright, so here's what I'm talking about. When I click the tower and I do click buy a tower, the map region interface changes to red is not a valid placement. I cannot place a tower here. Green is a valid placement, and blue is where they spawn from. So whenever I click to buy a tower, the map user interface changes to give us that look. So in order to do that, we need to have several properties. We need to have several textures to handle the look we want to achieve. So we'll have texture 2D for a valid placement. That's going to be green. Get and private set. In the forest map, it's going to be green. So it's actually going to use the map's forecolor to do that. Now, the invalid placement, remember it gave us a red overlay for stuff we cannot, on tiles we cannot place towers. So we have a public texture 2D invalid placement. Get and private set. And then the blue overlay for the spawner, the spawn placement. Texture 2D spawn placement. Get and private set. Alright, so for the next property, it's going to be a enhancement to the monsters, and you will see whenever the wave starts in a few seconds that when a monster runs from the spawn point at the bottom, you will see a little green bar above the texture. That is going to be the health display, and we'll need to create that in a texture property. So let's go ahead and create a public texture 2D monster health display. Get and private set. Okay. Now, when we have a tower selected, it gives us the ring to identify its attack radius. That is all in the map region class, so we need a way to have a reference of the selected tower. So create a public tower property called selected active tower, and that will allow us to, whenever we set this tower object, when it's not null, it'll display that ring, and it'll give us the attack radius. So when we do the draw method, it'll see if this is not null, it'll draw the attack radius texture. Alright, so let's go ahead and start the method. We'll wait until part 2 to code the method bodies. So, public map region, this is the constructor. Session S, comma, rectangle R, comma, graphics device GD. Opening parentheses and opening closing curly brackets. And we'll finish this up in part 2. There's a few more methods that we'll go ahead and create the method headers for. So void session underscore tower sold. Whenever we sell a tower, the session object throws an event called tower sold. It'll throw a sold event. Now what we need to do in the map region is, now this will wait until part 2, but I'm just explaining what the process is. Whenever we sell a tower, we need to check if that tower that we're selling is the selected tower that we have up here. If it is, we need to clear out the selected active tower. We need to set this to null if what we sold was this tower. Opening and closing parentheses. After the void session underscore tower sold, add the opening and closing parentheses. Alright, now let's add the next one, which is tower purchased. So void session underscore tower purchased. Opening and closing parentheses as well, opening and closing curly brackets. Void T underscore left click event. Opening closing parentheses and opening and closing curly brackets. Now this T left click event is going to be when we left click the tower. The tower on the map. When we left click it, it's going to set the selected active tower to whatever tower was clicked. So that way we can display the attack radius. Alright, now we need, of course, is the public void update. Game time, opening and closing parentheses, and opening and closing curly brackets. Then, of course, we need to have a public void draw, opening and closing parentheses, and in between there, game time, comma, sprite batch, comma, sprite font. Opening and closing curly brackets. One last method to add, and that's going to be reset the references. Whenever we reset the map or do any internal reset on the engine wants us to reset something, we need to have a way to reset all of our references. So internal void reset tower references. Opening closing parentheses, opening closing curly brackets. Go ahead and save the class, and we'll fill in these method bodies on part 2. So, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. We're getting closer to part 2 and getting closer to the actual fun code. I know this is pretty boring to just do properties and method headers. But once we get to part 2, we'll get to the more interesting stuff. So anyway, next tutorial, we're going to cover the command info bar, part 1. So, I hope to see you next time.